Welcome to the Skirted Professional Podcast, a place where women of all different walks of life come together to share their journeys and wisdom they've learned along the way. We are so excited that you're part of this community. We hope you always leave this space feeling encouraged, inspired, and a little less alone. The Skirted Professional is brought to you by C Saucy, a medical apparel company that specializes in modern scrub skirt sets for the working woman. Their goal is to give every woman the option to wear a skirt in their workplace without compromising the comfort, style, or functionality of their scrubs. You can check them out at csaucy.com. That's CSAUCY.com. All right, without further ado, let's get to today's episode. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Can you start off just by telling listeners what your life looks like currently?
Yeah, so I live in Connecticut with my husband and my two kids, teenagers, and I am a nurse. And I just recently became the nurse manager of a learning performance department, so in education. So very busy. And just crazy with teenagers and ministry. My husband's assistant pastor, and so just a lot of things going on.
Yeah, so cool. How long have you been a nurse?
So it's so interesting you asked me that because just yesterday, one of my friends who I went to school with, who I work with, who I've known for many years, she just said, "We need to celebrate. It's our 20-year anniversary of being nurses because we went to nursing school together and everything. So 20 years in May will be
Wow.
that I've been a nurse. So crazy. I can't even believe it. I'm only 20 years old. I mean, I don't know how.
Yeah, how did that happen? You were born a nurse.
I know I was born.
That's amazing. Was that something that you always wanted to be, or how did that come about that you went through nursing school?
So no, actually, I know I wanted to be in the healthcare field, and when I was in high school, I did become a CNA, and I was working as a CNA through college and through high school, actually, even. And I actually, when I graduated high school, I went to UConn, University of Connecticut, and I was going for physical therapy. And after 1 year of that, I was like, I don't think I want to do this. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And my friend Sarah, who just was the one I went to school with, she's like, you know what? I'm going to nursing school, and I'm just going to go to this community college. And I was like, that sounds good. So I I dropped out of UConn and I went to school with her and became a nurse. So it's interesting. It's obviously like something that I enjoy, and I'm so glad I did. But I didn't realize it at the time that that's what I was meant to be. So it was
So it
weird.
just was kind of, yeah, happenstance turned into a 20-year career. That's great. So going through school, I know you do clinicals and kind of try out different, floors or departments. Um, what did you kind of want to do, and how did you find your interest, and then where you landed after that?
Yeah, so I went to a community college, so I got my associate's degree, and I graduated in 2002. And, when I was going through my nursing school, I didn't really have an area that I really enjoyed. I liked most of it, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so when I graduated, I was working at a small community hospital as a nurse's aide. And so when I graduated as a nurse, I joined the float pool. So I floated all over
Mm.
the hospital as a new grad, which was super tough. But
Yeah.
really, it shapes me. I learned so much. I met so many people. I knew everybody. I floated from all the med surge units to the ED, the emergency department, labor and delivery, psych. I just floated everywhere.
Mm.
So that really kind of just rounded me to everything. And I still never really liked like a specific place. I kind of liked floating because you didn't get involved in the politics of things. And,
Mm,
you just kind of went and did your job, and people really
sure.
appreciated that you were helping them. And so after a couple years, um, I I took a temporary floating position in the recovery room because we didn't, that was the one place that we didn't really float to. But they had I think 3 or 4 maternity leaves at the same time. And they asked one of us if we would float there for, a few months while, all their nurses were on maternity leave. So
Mhm.
I said, I'll do it because, I'm always up for a new challenge. And that's really where I fell in love with just the
Mm,
recovery. I loved it, and I still do. If I ever have to go back to bedside nursing, I would definitely go back to recovery. And so I did my little stint down there for a few months, and they asked me if I wanted a job there. The one drawback about working there was I did not want to do 5 days a week, 8 hours, because my daughter was just a year old at the
mhm.
time, and I was just like, you know what, I love it here, but Monday through Friday, I 9 to 5:30. I just feel like I'm missing so much. So I
Yeah.
kind of, I said that. I said, I love it here. I want to work here, but I don't want to do 5 days a week, 8 hours. So I went back to the float pool and floated around. And then next thing I knew, they actually posted a 4 10-hour position.
Mm,
So I was like, I think I could do 4 10s. So I applied, and I went to the recovery room, and I was there for 7 or 8 years, 7 years in the recovery room. And in that time, I eventually evolved to 3 12-hour shifts. So it was even better. It was the best of
yeah.
both worlds because I could work 3 12s and no weekends or holidays, and it worked out really good.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
that's how I kind of progressed through.
Okay. So during this time, I know you mentioned your daughter was a year old when you were kind of in the um that position to make that decision whether you wanted to have that job full time or not. Tell us just what was going on in your family, the timeline kind of for ministry and family for you and your husband.
Yeah, so my husband and I got married right when I started nursing school. So we got married sort of young. I was 2 years out of high school. I was 20, he was 21, and I had finished all my prereqs for school, and I was just going right into nursing school. So we got married, and then I graduated and started working full time. Then I had my daughter a couple years later. Um, my husband became a minister, I think when he was about 21, 22. So right around the time we got married, he became a minister. We were on the youth committee, started around that time. So very busy with youth functions. And, um, throughout that time, um, in 2009 had my son. So throughout all of this, we were in ministry and on the youth committee. He became youth secretary, and eventually, actually in 2013, right when I graduated with my master's, he became youth president. So kind of like worked out around
Yeah.
that time. So always heavily involved and doing all sorts of youth functions. And so it was kind of crazy for a while, just the with kids and work and ministry, and school on top of that.
Yeah.
So it was. I look back on it, and I know that there was only one way I could have made it through, and that was with God, because there was some crazy nights and crazy days
Yeah. Well, it's
for
good to
sure.
know as someone who's kind of in that baby, little kid ministry, job, school season that there is another side to it at some point,
Oh
and
yeah,
that it's not like that
so
forever.
so true. No. In 2009, my son was a year old was when I started going back to school again for my bachelor's and my master's. So he was 1, my daughter was 5, and it was just kind of a crazy time with so my husband bought a business as well. So
Mm,
on top of everything, we were business owners,
yeah.
and right after he bought the business, it kind of the he's a printer, bought a print shop, and the printing kind of went downhill for a while. So there was some really crazy, financial times as well. And so we were
Mm,
thinking, and around 2008, 2009, like, what should we do? Do you want to go back to school? Should I go back to school and get my master's? So we kind of had that like moment where like we didn't really, we knew we needed to do something, but didn't know what. And I love to learn. I love school. So I was like, I want to go back to school. so so I went back, started in 2009. And so working full time, two young kids, school, ministry, business. Yeah, there was a lot of late nights and early mornings and um, kind of, I think I was probably a little insane to do it, but made it
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. How do you
And it
remember
was a good thing.
Yeah. How do you remember making it through? Do you remember what kind of kept you pushing forward? Because it sounds like on every front you were busy.
Yeah, really the thing was that I knew it was what God wanted me to do, and
Mm.
I was determined because of that. And I've always had that kind of determined. If I put my mind to it, and if I knew
Yeah.
it was what God wanted me to do, then I just took one step forward and kept going. And so, yeah, I just kind of just did it one day at a time.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have to say, because I did online school after I finished my master's program, I don't think I opened a laptop or a computer for probably over a year. I was sick of it.
Yeah, I did the
I was
same
like, "I
as
don't
soon as
wanna
I
look at a
finished grad
computer."
school. Yeah. If you don't have
Yep.
to in certain seasons, even if you, like you said, learn
Mhm.
or love learning, there are times when you are tapped out.
Yep.
So
Definitely.
so you decided to go for your master's. What area did you go in?
So I've always loved education, and when I was working in the recovery room, I was the primary preceptor, so I trained all of the new people that were coming in.
Mm,
And I just really enjoyed that. I love to kind of see them grow and flourish and just like see how they um, just kind of captured the concepts. And I just really enjoyed that. So it was kind of a no brainer. I just thought,
mhm.
if I'm going to go for my master's, I'm going to do education. I didn't think I was going to be a leader, which ironically I am now, but in education. So I guess that kind of negates it. But I just love to teach. So I just figured I'd go for that. And I worked while I was going to school, I was in the recovery room. And I always thought I was going to be a clinical educator. So kind of teaching academically and bringing students to, clinical sites and teaching them in that way. And when I graduated, I wanted to go part time in the recovery room and do that part time, and
Mhm.
kind of use my degree in that way. Um, but it didn't work out that way, and I know it was all God. Because where I was working, they didn't want me to go part time. They said, no, you either quit or you have to work here full time. So then I was like, well, maybe I'll, work full time. I'm only doing 312s, and then I could do clinicals as well. Um, so I was kind of playing with that, toying with that idea. And, and then God just miraculously, I think, one of the educators at the hospital where I was working just retired. Like, just
Mm.
randomly, I was like not expecting it. And I was like, wow, does this mean like, maybe I should apply? It was exactly the time when I graduated. Like, it was just
Wow.
perfect timing. So I was like, oh, let me just apply. I had no like reservations about it, but I didn't, I was like, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I'm in the same spot I was before. So
Sure.
I applied and I got it. So I moved right from the recovery room to education in the
Mm.
same place I was working. I actually worked there for 16 years
Wow.
total from the time I started there as
Mhm.
a nurse. I grew there, became the educator. I covered many areas as an educator. So I covered the recovery room, so I was became their educator, which is fun. And the operating room, uh, med surge, orthopedics, oncology. I covered all of those areas as their educator. So I was there for 4 years as the educator, and I was kind of in my comfort, I was like just cruising along and doing what I love in the same place I'd been at for many years, knew everyone, and
Mhm.
my friend Sarah, again, she's really pivotal in all my life changes, I think.
She sounds like a good friend.
You should have her on the podcast at some point.
Absolutely.
So she worked at Connecticut Children's, and which is a standalone hospital here in Connecticut, pediatric hospital. And she was doing informatics and was part of an education team, but not really in education. And so she's like, "We have an educator position open. You should apply for it." And I was like, "Nah, I'm not in peds. Like, I don't want to do
Mm.
pediatrics." And my peds rotation in my school was like awful. I hated it. I was like, I can't do peds.
Yeah.
So, but I was like, you know what? I love education, and this is something like interesting. I would be working with you. So I was like, let me just apply and see what happens. And if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I like where I am. So kind of seems like this whole, like my whole life has been
Yeah.
a
It sounds
series of those kind
familiar.
of things. Yeah. So I interviewed, and I really enjoyed and really felt just like a different atmosphere when I was there. It was really
Mm.
kind of so, I don't know if you've ever been in a pediatric hospital, but so fun and so just
Mhm.
kind of cool, And so they offered me the job, and I was like, wow, this is okay, God. Like, are you trying to get me out of my comfort zone? What are you doing? And really had to pray and just really seek God, like, is this what you want me to do? And so I took it, and I've been there for 4 years now. And I had the opportunity
Mm.
to become the manager of the department. And so I've been doing that for a couple years now. I mean, a couple months. Sorry, a couple months. It's been a crazy couple months too.
Yeah. We can definitely see the progression of, being a nurse and then being an educator and now being a leader in education, kind of walking that up. How have those transitions been for you as you kind of step from one role into another? I know you even mentioned you were the educator for the department that you had previously been in. So how have you found those transitions?
Yeah, it's interesting. They actually have a class for this, transitioning from staff to management. And um it can be challenging sometimes. But I feel like in my position it's kind of unique in that with COVID, our team kind of uh, was reduced, let's just say, was
Mm.
reduced by a lot. And so for a while, even at the beginning of COVID, because COVID affected pediatrics so much differently than the adults.
Mhm.
In the adult hospitals, they had so many people, and you know, they were full. Where in the pediatric
Mhm.
hospital, especially at the beginning of COVID, we didn't have as many patients, and they canceled surgeries. So we actually, a lot of our team members were furloughed, and I was furloughed for a
Mhm.
while, or half time furloughed. So it was just like a different, I think, environment for a while. And so we didn't have as much education going on. We, kind of we're just maintaining for a little while.
Mm.
So in the last, when I took the manager position, there was only one other educator besides me, and she had only been there for about 4 months or six
Mm.
months. So I wasn't her peer for very long before becoming the manager. And so
Sure.
now we have a full team. I have a couple other educators that have started on, and some per diems or as needed educators.
Mhm.
So it hasn't been a very difficult transition because of that. I think, not that I think it would have been a very difficult position either way. I think I have a good rapport with the team, so, and
Mhm.
everyone there. So, but
Sure.
it definitely can have some challenges too.
Absolutely. How did you find it within yourself? Did you feel like you were able to transition easily from operating in one role to now operating in a new role?
I think that has been a big challenge only because um, I was still doing a lot of the things that I needed to do as an educator because even though I was moving from educator to manager,
Mm.
we still had to fill my role, right? So I was still
Yeah.
am still doing a lot of what I was doing as an educator. I have to transition those to the new educators. So I'm starting to do that. The last couple weeks, definitely with our new educators that just started in the last month. But it was, January, I started my new position January 3rd. So right after the new year. And so I was still doing everything as an educator. I didn't feel like it really changed, except I had a new office, but I was still teaching classes and still managing everything. But it's starting to now change a little bit more where I'm handing things off and taking more of the
Mhm.
leaders part. Like it's been like when I first started, I was like 99% educator, 1% manager. I would have to say I'm probably about
Sure.
50-50 now. So maybe in the next couple months, I'll
Okay.
be more manager
Well, that's
for
kind of
sure.
nice that you had a slower transition, that it wasn't just a hard, one day you were this and then the next day you were completely in a different role, that it was a little bit of a transitional time for you.
Hmm. For sure.
So I'm curious because I know you personally from your ministry on a national level, and just so everyone knows, Melissa, the way that we met, we were both attending a conference about six years ago now, and it was my first time
Mm.
there. I didn't really know anyone, and I walked into the room, and I probably looked like a lost puppy, and Melissa was so kind and invited me to sit with her, and we just became fast friends from then. And so I know that you kind of carry that presence with you everywhere that you go. So how have you found, as you go and you are a leader kind of on the ministry side and then now on the career side as well, how have you those skills kind of from one to another kind of merged together? Have they helped you from your career side or from the ministry side or vice versa?
I think both, honestly, but I think definitely from the ministry to being a leader in my career. I don't know if it's just being a leader, but I think it's just being with people of God. I think we just
Mm,
um, I think that people see that people in our
mhm,
workplaces, if you're not around people that are Christians, they know when you are. They can see it. They might not be able to
mhm,
pinpoint that you're a Christian, but they know something is different. So I definitely think that being a leader in the ministry with my husband, and it was all him, honestly. I just tagged along. But it definitely has helped. It definitely has opened my eyes to just the broader expanse of what God can do. I just think, sometimes we get so stuck in what's going
mhm,
on in our lives and in our churches, and just to see how God is working outside of that sphere and in the world and in our country and with people. I know
mhm.
with you and where we were, it was, with other young people, with other youth ministries, and you just get so encouraged by it. So I definitely think there's
Yeah,
a reciprocal positive effect for sure.
I love it. And you can definitely see along your journey how it seems like God orchestrated all along the way different experiences to get you where you are today, whether it was floating
Sure.
to every department, because then eventually you were the educator for all of those same departments and you kind of had some experience with most of them, it sounds like, to,
Mhm.
stepping into leadership on the ministry front larger than just the local church. and then stepping into leadership from a hospital standpoint. It's so cool to see those stepping stones that seem like they have been there for you along the way, even
Mhm.
as you're talking and saying that, in the moment it felt like, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so many of those moments became so pivotal for you.
So many. Mhm. For sure. Yeah, it's so true. There's so many moments that you kind of don't see it at the time, but then you look back on and you're like, wow, that was like you said, pivotal. That was a like a goalpost.
Mm.
That was something that just like really changed the trajectory of our lives. So for sure, God is great.
Mm. Yeah. I love just hearing other people's stories because it is hard sometimes when you're going along and you feel somewhat lost of what am I supposed to do? Even if we have an end goal in mind, which it sounds like maybe that even though you had fields that you wanted to go into, it wasn't necessarily this is where I want to end up and this is the position I want. And but sometimes we do have that and we don't know at all how to get there, or we have other goals. It sounds like you wanted to support your family and your husband and his business and your ministry together and find a way to do that. And so, all along the way, as we're walking, it's sometimes so hard to let go of that control and be okay with whatever comes next, taking that next step, doing the day
Yes.
by day walk.
For sure. Yeah, and it's so funny that you say that because that's really what, my calling was from a teenager. I always felt that I know when I when I was younger, and this was a long time ago, all the girls would go to Bible school, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know if that's the right course for me, and I just felt like a little
Mm,
odd because I was the one that wasn't. And I
mm,
remember being at a youth convention when I was a teenager and just feeling just that burden and that calling that God was calling me to go into a career that could help support my husband in the ministry. And that's, has been my, I guess, my guiding, like that's just what I was meant to be. And even I
mm,
have to remind my husband sometimes, like, this is just what my calling is to support you in your ministry and financially support our family so that we could really do what God wants us to do. So I've always looked at that as that's my calling. It wasn't to
mm.
be in the pulpit or to go to Bible school, and it was just always to have a career that would help support the ministry,
Yeah. I love that you say
whatever that
that.
was.
And yeah, it sounds like you have found a certain confidence in yourself, or in the calling that God has placed on your life as you've gone along the way. How has that been strengthened? Where did that confidence come from?
Yeah, I think it's just trusting in God every step of the way. I knew I didn't always know what the outcome was going to be, right? But I knew that this was my calling and this is what I needed to do, and I just had to take the next step. Um, you know, Sometimes it can be overwhelming when you think about the whole thing, and I always tell this to my kids, this analogy, and they laugh, and they're like, what are you talking about? It's how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? Because if you look at the big picture of it, it's like overwhelming, but you just take the next step, take the next
Mhm.
bite, right? So you just go one step at a time, and going towards what that goal is, and you'll get there eventually with God's help. So it's really what I always think
Mm,
about, and trust him with all of those little things that I don't know, like, okay, God, this is hard right now. I don't really know what to do, but I'm just going to take that next step. And he
mm.
always makes it work out.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think too it can be overwhelming not knowing the future, but then I also think on the flip side it's kind of like what you were saying, if God were to tell you this is what I have for you in 10 years, in 20 years, we might be so overwhelmed by the size of the elephant or the size of, where he wants to take us in a good way that
Mhm.
we might doubt ourselves and not walk down that path that he has for us because we don't have that confidence in the ability of what we can do. And I think as we
Yeah.
learn to trust him, that confidence of, yes, if this door opens, okay, I can do that one. Okay, yes, I can do that one. I can do today. I can do tomorrow.
Mhm.
But if we were to jump ahead or have that knowledge that maybe we would kind of quit before we even got started, because of the way
Mhm.
that our journeys unfold, trusting him.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's just so many things that happen along the way that not even just in my career, but in our family that just kind of was like testing us and making us think about, why are we going through this? And it makes us stronger for that next step too. It
Mm.
prepares us for that next step and pushes us towards that. So yeah, definitely. There's so many things that you can't even like if I knew 10 years ago where I'd be now, I would be like, no way. It's crazy.
Yeah. Can you think back to a time? Is there a time that comes to mind where a challenge came up and in that moment it was hard to think about what would be next or how that specific
Mm.
situation would resolve?
Oh, definitely. I could just tell you a year. um, two, 2000 and, 2008, it started off great. My son was born, in February, and it was wonderful. But then 5 days later, my dad had a major heart attack and was in open heart surgery and, didn't know if he was gonna make it, and it was, I was also postpartum 5 days, and it was crazy. Going up to my parents live in Maine, so driving up to Maine and being with my family and then, when things kind of settled, we got home, and a couple weeks later, I got really sick and I was septic. I was in the hospital
Mm.
for a week, and it
Oh,
just felt like everything was happening, and finally I started to get better after a month or so, and again still had a newborn and trying to make it
yeah.
through. And that summer, going on vacation, we hit a moose. Like, well, how does that even happen?
Oh my
We're driving and hit a moose. So it just
god.
felt like that year, thing after thing was
Mhm.
happening. It just was like, what is happening? What are you trying to teach us, God? What is that? And I really honestly think that he was preparing us for, even though those were outward things that were happening, there was some things happening underneath, that really God was preparing us
Mhm.
for. Some big challenges with the business, and my
Mhm.
husband was working so hard to try to make sure that the business was going to be successful. We still had a huge loan for the business, and
Mhm.
he had multiple people tell him to file bankruptcy because of the business and everything that was happening. And he just, in his right mind, in his like mind, he's like, I can't do this. This is like what I have to just
Mhm.
keep going. And that's really, I think all of those things, God brought us through that and showed us, like, time
Mhm.
after time, that He was there with us through those challenges, like through miraculous things. And my husband has preached about it before, but just, how He has answered prayer after prayer and brought us through that time where now we're just looking back on it, and like, if He brought us through that time, He could bring us through a lot more in our future that we, are just
Mhm.
our faith built through that, and it's just
Yeah.
great to look back on and see those trials and just know that He was there every step of the way with us.
Wow. How beautiful is that? And as you were just continuing to walk, your persistence kind of gave his faithfulness a chance to meet you and to
Hmm.
pull you out of those situations. over and over. But wow, what an incredible time for you with, every front. Again, motherhood and business and job and family.
Yeah.
Um, and looking back on kind of a landmark in a different way than the
Hmm.
job acceptance and the new doors and the exciting opportunities. Those hard times sometimes are even more of a landmark for us in our journeys.
Certainly.
Yeah. Well, just as you're talking, I know that everybody finds their journeys leading them in different ways, but this seems to be such a theme of when you are walking by faith and you are a Christian called in whatever capacity you are called to, um, how God shows up in his faithfulness and honors that persistent walk in every area, and how he just gives us little, even if they're personal to us and they don't maybe mean so much as we're telling other people about them, personal confirmations all along the way. I'm
Oh
curious,
yeah, definitely.
have you in your journey as a nurse, because I know that first you started off with patient care, so interacting with patients, and now you're more interacting with coworkers. Have you had times where you have known that God has orchestrated moments for you to be there and to be able to minister, even if it wasn't overtly said, that you were ministering to that person, but you knew that God had placed you in that exact moment?
I think every moment, I just kind of reflect on like my light
Mm.
shining. And we live in an area of the country where it's not very, it's harder to, we're not in the Bible Belt, okay? So we're just like, things are, you
Right.
can't just come out, and there's not a lot of Christian people around. And but it's
Mhm.
interesting because along the way it's like you meet people and they're like, "Oh, you're a Christian? I am too." And it's almost like a little club, and it's it's kind of cool. Especially even in my workplace, sometimes you're like, "Wow, I didn't know that they were a Christian." And so then you kind of like start
Mm.
chatting about things. And it's interesting because I don't know, probably shouldn't, maybe I should. Our CNO, our chief nursing officer, is a Christian, and I didn't really,
Okay.
I hadn't didn't have a lot of interaction with her. She was a newer CNO, and when I was doing my interviews for the manager position, she was one of the ones that
Mhm.
interviewed me, and it was just her and I, and we were just chatting. And we were talking about our kids. And she was saying that her kids go to a Baptist school down a couple towns over. And I was like, "Oh, my son goes to a Baptist school too, a Christian school." And so we started chatting, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's so great. You're Christian. This is awesome." And we were doing book recommendations. And she was like, "Oh, I
Wow.
love that book." And so it was a nice kind of an open door, and kind of just was like, "Wow, God, you are so good that you have these people, these Christians, these people of like faith, even though maybe it's not the
Mm.
exact. You have these people in places where they can let their light shine, and they can have, an impact on
Mm.
the lives of people who are hurting, and probably in the worst times of their lives." And not just the
Yeah.
patients, but even the people that we work with, right? We can just
Mhm.
say a kind word to them, or say, "You know what, I'll pray for you," when they're going through a hard time. And I think that really means a lot to people. So I definitely think that we are in wherever we are, God is putting us there for a reason. And we just need to keep our light shining for that, when that door opens, to just walk through.
Yeah. I love that, and I think it's so incredible when you do have those moments. I as you're talking, I'm thinking of a time when I was going through a hard time personally, and I had a Christian supervisor at work, and what a difference having a fellow Christian made for me and how much it encouraged me and refresh my spirit during a really difficult time of my life. And what a lifeline
Mhm.
it was, just to have someone, like you're saying, of like mind in my workplace. And, it wasn't the same exact denomination. We didn't view the same on everything, but that love of God was still so evident. And knowing the impact it made
Mhm.
on me, hoping to turn around and be that for someone else when they need it. And just like you're saying, be that light to everyone around us, whether we're overtly saying like, oh yes, it's, God in me, or if they just feel it and just are impacted by who we are and the fact that we walk in the
Mhm.
spirit when we walk into the room.
Mhm. For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today and for being so open with your story and willing to kind of walk us through. As we kind of wrap up, is there anything that you would want to share with our listeners? Anything you've learned along the way, or a message kind of that you've become passionate about?
Yeah, I think the main message is just to trust God and take that next
Mm,
step, and he'll open doors, and he'll blow your mind with what he has for you. He knows best what's best for us, right? And I don't pretend to know what's best for myself. He knows it, and I
mm,
just it's kind of refreshing to give that control to him. And
mm.
I just feel like when he controls it, then I know that it's all going to be okay. So I just say that, just take the next step, and or take the next bite. Don't look at the whole
Yeah.
elephant. Take the next bite, um, and you'll be so glad, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, to wrap up, I want to ask you a question that we ask everyone, and you can kind of give me your knee jerk reaction. It can be silly, serious, whatever pops into your mind. So, what is saving your life right now?
Well, I already know that you were going to ask that question, so because I listened to the podcast, I'm like, I got to prepare myself for this question.
Gotta have an
Well, my
answer.
knee jerk reaction is yeah, my knee jerk reaction is coffee, of course. Coffee. Dan, my husband, books, reading, because I need to relax, and that's my way of relaxing. And then my planner is my next saving thing.
I love it. See, when you know the question's coming, you have four things that are saving your life.
I know. I was like, I couldn't pick one, and they're not in any certain order, by the way. Let me
I'm
just
sure
put that
Dan will
out
love
there,
to
because
hear
Dan will
that.
say, "Why am I second? Why am I second?"
Well, I love it. Thank you again for sharing with us. I know what you have to say will be important and valuable and hit home for someone out there. So thanks for taking the time, and we loved every minute of it.
No, thank you so much for having me, Ellery. It's been great.
All right, thanks. Bye bye.